Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you back to another episode of the Montessori Microphone, which is the podcast for Montessori Makers Group. This week, we have focused a lot on the young children's community, so I am so excited to have my guest here today. I would like to welcome you to see Carol Segal. She is the owner and founder of the Bambini Method. She has worked with lots of young children and families, and so we would like to welcome her here today. Thank you for being here, Carol.
Thank you for having me, Hannah.
So I've got some questions here that I'd like to ask, and I would love to hear your input about the way that you do this work because I find that so often in Montessori, we focus on often primary, 3 to 6 year olds. Sometimes we get into elementary, but I feel like we don't talk enough about the needs of young children, and
Mhm.
this is your wheelhouse.
Yes.
So, can you first speak to what inspired you to develop the Bambini method and how it integrates Montessori principles into everyday caretaking?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, the best way for me to answer this question is to kind of maybe tell you a little bit about my background and where I came from and how I got to where I am. That's really the best way for me to kind of get get to your answer. So I've been teaching Montessori for over 20 plus years. I would say actually 25 years this year.
Wow.
Um, So I started as an assistant. I found it as I was going to college, and I like this is what I want to do. So I went and did my AMI's A to I training, which is ages birth to 3, and then I've been teaching ever since. Um, and in I've always worked with toddlers, ages 2 to 3. At one point, I even worked with toddlers ages 15 to 24 months. And that's important for you to know. So I am going to go back into detail later on, probably at some point as we're talking. Um, and when the pandemic hit, as for so many, everything changed.
Mhm.
And for me personally, I lost my job. At that point, I was working as an administrator, as a curriculum coordinator. I was in charge of 10 nursery classroom, starting at 6 weeks, all the way up to 3 years old. And all I knew was Montessori and working at a school.
Mhm.
So when, as so many of us sitting at home, I knew I had to come up with a solution and think of a way, how can I continue teaching and using my knowledge and to support others. So I really came down to some major questions like, what is it that parents are always asking for help with?
Mhm.
And for me, it was toilet training, sleep, and discipline.
Mhm.
I want to say it's just for me, but those are the common questions I always got. And for toilet training, it's totally understandable. It's kids are 2, and
Right.
and for us I know for most schools, in order to go into the children's house, which is 3, children are expected to be independent and toileting on their own.
Mhm.
And that was the same with where I was working. So I had no choice but to get every single child transitioned to underwear and confident, independent by the time they transitioned, by the time they were 3 years old. So I could honestly say I've been 100% successful in doing
Wow.
so
Mhm.
uh, in all the years that I was teaching. So
Amazing.
uh, yeah, it and to me it was easy, and now I'm finding how much of a struggle it is for other people. Um, didn't know, right?
Mhm.
And so I that's how the Bambini method kind of came about. Um I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. And I started doing research. I actually even took a potty training course, a sleep consulting course, positive discipline course, and I kind of intertwined everything into what I'm doing. And so that's kind of how the Bambini method kind of began. And but mainly these days, I would say I'm mostly focused on just the toilet learning aspect of things.
So you've helped over 1,000 children, I'm sure, with toilet training in your years. What are some of the key signs that indicate that toddlers are ready to start along this path?
Yeah. So so I'm going to go back to my experience working in the classroom. And so for us, we kind of started just a child was starting in our classroom, and we didn't force them to go into underwear. We met the child where they're at. So I would say just about every single child came to our toddler classroom at 2 in diapers. So we just set up the space, set up the environment for success. We had consistent routines and consistent times of when we had our bathroom breaks. And I trained the assistants of what needed to be done, what language we should be using, and then the just naturally the child on their own knew or would start producing and voiding and going in the toilet versus the diapers. So when we started seeing that they were more successful in making it more in the toilet, their diapers are staying drier for longer periods of time. That is when, and then of course we had educational classes for the parents, and I educated the parents during our conferences, and it was always a big discussion all the time.
Mhm.
Toileting, eating, all those fun things always had to be documented too.
Mhm.
So I always saved all the documentation as well. And once I saw certain patterns, I kind of knew that I always asked the parents to kind of start it over the weekend and get guided them what to be doing over the weekend and how to transition to underwear. And so when they came back to me on Monday, they came to me in underwear, and we kind of just continued the process. And I'm a big believer, once you transition to underwear, that's it. There's no going back to diapers or pull-ups. And to
Mhm.
me, diapers, and just so you guys know, the audience knows, to me, diapers and pull-ups are the same thing. So they
Mhm.
both pull-ups and diapers, you pee in them, you go in them. The only difference are the tabs at the waist.
Mhm. So, how does your approach to supporting children through toilet training differ from traditional potty training methods?
Yeah, I like to follow where the child is developmentally versus I'm taking this weekend, or I'm home for this week and things like that. So because I had the luxury of working with infants, we started in the infant classroom actually. So as soon as the child was sitting comfortably on their own, that is when while we're doing diaper changes, that is when we actually introduced the potty
Mhm.
chair. So there was no expectations, nothing. We just every once in a while would take them off the changing table, sit them on the potty chair for a minute or so, 30 seconds, whatever, put a clean diaper on, and then they went on their way. So at a really early, and then as soon as the child's walking comfortably on their own and or standing comfortably on their own, that's when we were able to start taking them into the bathroom and changing them in the bathroom, standing up versus the changing table, and start incorporating diaper changes that way. So kind of developmentally. So again, so we since we started so early on, the child just we all we did was change the environment. All we did was change how we're changing the diapers, compared to anything else, if that makes sense. Um, and so it was the child who showed us when they understood, when they started voiding and going, and releasing and keeping the diapers dry for longer. Um, the earliest I personally transitioned a child from diapers to underwear in the school setting was 14 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the child wasn't verbal. The child did not have the fine motor skills to pull up, pull down on their own, but they were very consistent in staying dry, and they were very consistent in voiding when we sat them on the potty. Um, and and so with help with the adults and the child's know-how, it worked.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think this is such great information because, I also have been Montessorian for 25 years, and I worked primarily with 3 to 6-year-old children when I was in the classroom and learned very little about this process. So I just cannot
Yeah.
thank you enough for this. What strategies do you recommend for parents who are dealing with resistance or fear during this process?
Yeah, so this is where a lot of just some positive discipline or parenting tools are very helpful. And I like to kind of talk to the child about it, not when you're in the process of using the toilet or things like that. So that's part of the reasons why I developed some flashcards. I developed activity for pages. I have sequence pages. All these things are useful tools that you could approach your child with and play with them in a sense outside the bathroom environment. So you're kind of just talking to them about it. You're talking to them what their expectations are, what's what do they see, what do they do, what do they hear, and maybe asking them some curiosity questions and maybe hearing and knowing what is going on in their head. Sometimes the fear comes from some trauma in the sense of if the child is ever constipated, so constipation could, of course, add some pain. And of course,
Mhm,
whenever there's any kind of pain involved, that brings in the fear, and then children don't want to end up pooping, and that's where the withholding comes in. That's a whole different topic on its own. But
mhm,
so sometimes it has the fear. So I always found though, if you set up the environment for success, especially if you're starting at a earlier age and just showing them this is how we do it, that's why I call it toilet learning versus toilet training, because you're just kind of going through the process. So there's really no, this is just what they know. This is how they do it. There's
mhm,
no, because once they get older, that's when a lot of their minds are stronger, and then they have that fear, and the more resistance saying no. That's the famous 2-year-old's words is no,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, and I think that for a lot of families, once they get over that hump of supporting children through toilet learning during the day, they immediately start to wonder, what about nighttime? What do you have to say about learning about like releasing in the night and trying to avoid those accidents?
Yeah. So for nighttime, so again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer of once you transition from into underwear, there's no more diapers. So that's also including nighttime. But as I'm working with families one-to-one currently on nighttime training, that is something that I would say I'm mostly focused on daytime training. And then I guide the parents on what to be doing at nighttime and what some things that they could start getting ready for nighttime. Because it's so often that, when I'm talking to parents, like, okay, when do you provide any kind of liquid? So many families still provide water or milk, and they keep it by the child's bed.
Mhm,
And so those little things are things that I say, all right, we need to stop liquids at dinner time. You have to set up the child for success in order for them to be successful at nighttime. So
mhm,
basically, I guide the families on how to set up for success. What are some things they need to start doing? What are some things that they could start doing while the child's still wearing diapers at nighttime? And kind of learning and knowing when do they void, when do they go. Um, and you can do something called dream peas and check in on them, taking them. But I'm also a big believer in not having to wake a sleeping child up.
mhm,
So I also kind of see what's the reason or why do they need to do nighttime training if it's something that doesn't happen naturally on its own.
mhm. Okay. Well, what about how do you speak to the type of language or communication that's really important in this process when we're working with children and helping them this how to do it?
Yeah, that's huge. I would say that's probably one of the number one things I do educate parents on.
Mm, mhm,
As for me, as natural all this is, but being Montessori trained, in Montessori, I do feel or tend that we do kind of speak differently, if that makes sense. Um, and we speak respectful, and we respect the child's answers and things like that. So often when I'm working with families and I like the number one question I ask them, so how do you invite your child to go use the toilet or to go change their diaper? And so often it's like, oh, do you need to go potty? And so whenever you're asking a child a yes or no question, almost every child's going to say no to this question. It's
Mhm.
just natural because they just love that word no. Um, so so I like to reframe it instead of saying, "Do you need to go potty?" I'm like, "Oh, I see your diaper's wet. Let's go change." And then I give them a choice. Would you like to hold my hand or would you like to walk by yourself? Would you like to tiptoe or would you like to skip? So I'm giving them a directive, telling them what we're doing, but they do get a choice on how we get there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I often educating parents on those types of things. And, so sometimes you offer, would you like to sit in the potty chair? Or would you like to sit in the toilet? Again, in Montessori, we use the real terms, the real language. And that's also a big reason why I don't call it potty training. To start, they do use the potty. It is a potty chair, but so often, really realistically, it's a toilet. We use the toilet, we go to the bathroom, and we start everything happens on the toilet. So that's why I call it toilet learning.
Oh,
As-
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when it comes to children who might have varying needs or are in different developmental stages, are there ways that you tailor the toilet learning for them?
Yes and no. To be honest, the approach that I kind of take, which is like it's very natural, you're following the child's developmental needs, of them sitting and walking and standing. As long as your child's able to do all those, there's no reason why you cannot be doing that, introducing that at any stage, at any point, wherever they're at. But where it does become difficult, and so often when families have come to me, they're telling me, oh, my child's nonverbal. Um, and or they so many families feel like that is um a prerequisite to toilet learning. And to me, like I said, it's not. Um, so it's more of children have such a strong sense of order, and especially children who have special needs, they really thrive on routines. So it's making sure you have specific routines, specific timing of when you're doing things. So they know what to expect, when to expect it. They know first we eat, after we eat, and then we do this. You
Mhm.
know, let's bring nap time when we do nap time. Okay, before nap time, we go use the toilet, we go nap, we wake up, we use the toilet, things like that. And then some kids with needs, it's helpful and can be really powerful to create routine boards or visual boards. So often I guide families on how to do that. But even children of who don't have any kind of special needs, just using routine boards could be very powerful and useful for them too.
Mhm.
Again, I developed flashcards and other fun materials to kind of help with this too, in creating a social story and creating a visualization and bringing them into the story, bringing them what's going to look like, what do we do, talking about it, listening to what they're saying while you're just in a playful state. So sometimes their fears or sometimes their anxieties can come up as you're talking about it in a playful area. You could do role modeling. Um, between yourselves as adult or if there's other siblings. Um, you can use dolls and things like that too.
Oh, wow. So many options.
Yeah.
And then, what role does the environment itself play in supporting the independence and successful toilet learning?
Yeah. I think in no matter what you're doing or whether it's toilet training, any learning environment, you have to be set up for success. So what I always educate families in on how to set up your bathroom environment for success. You want to make sure that I like to start off using the potty chair versus the toilet because it's safe, easy, their legs are secure. But eventually they do grow, they're too big, right? So you do
Mhm.
need the toilet. And so then just making sure that they're able to get up onto the toilet safely, getting down safely on their own. I like to use stools versus there's lots of apparatuses that have ladders and handles and you put it on top.
Hmm.
I don't care for using those because I don't see how a toddler could get that up on the toilet by themselves if it's not up there already. You really want to be set up for success. So if you're not around, the child could just, because you never know, they may just walk into the bathroom by themselves.
Hmm.
Um, so you really want to make sure that you have everything that you need in the space that you need it. So for us, we're talking about the bathroom. So making sure their safety is number one, and secure, and everything that you need is there available um, to succeed in the toileting
That,
aspect.
that's great. And then, how do parents create a positive and empowering atmosphere that encourages their children at this time? How do you
Yeah,
focus on, like, I don't know, the good things as opposed to making your child worry about success?
I don't think a child ever has to be worried about success. I think that's more of a parent thing. So, so I think the best way to empower a child is the way you're communicating with them, the way, the language that you're using, giving them choices, creating that independence. You know, at first, at first, a child may not be able to pull up, pull down on their own. So at first, a parent's there to help them. You know, at first, the parent is like, "Oh, you do the front, I'll do the back," and you're doing it together at first. But then eventually, as you see that they're getting stronger, you let go of that and they start doing it on their own. um, in the Montessori classroom, you know, it's so often that children putting on their shoes on their own, and so often, right, when it comes to the right and left foot, they're
Mhm.
it's always opposite. So the number one thing that parents want to say, oh, you have it on the wrong foot. It's not the wrong foot. You know, one, you let it be because they did it on their own and they're proud of doing it on their own. And then two, only time you correct is if you're right there and able to catch it, and then you just say other foot or switch, you know, words like
Mhm.
that. I don't ever want to use any kind of negative words like wrong or no or things like that, because in the Montessori environment we don't like to use the word no. We
Mhm.
phrase everything in what we're doing without around using the word no. So I continue that in educating the families when I'm working with them one to one, on the language and what we're saying and how to keep the language positive, what we're doing positive, you know, how we're so often educating parents on just the tone could
Mhm.
be a way of shaming. So how we have to be so careful what we're saying, how we're saying, the tone we're saying it, and how just a little tweaks could make it more positive, empowering
I love how you
way of
bring
doing
the
things.
idea of honoring the child into all parts of this work. It really keeps this Montessori approach at the center. What
Yeah,
advice do you have for parents who are feeling overwhelmed or anxious about this whole process? Because it can be big.
it can. Um, you know, I think when I tell people that I'm a toilet training consultant, everybody's like, "Oh, I needed you 20 years ago or 5 years ago."
Hmm.
Um, and everybody, there's so many people don't know there is such a thing, and like anything, there can be. And just like maybe 20 years ago, sleep consultants weren't really widely used, or lactation consultants or anything. Um, it's really just, I think, slowing things down. I think so many people try to, you know, maybe their child's approaching 3 or they're having issues. Not everybody, sometimes people think that it's easy and it's just going to happen. But, and so often when I'm asking families, okay, well, what are you doing? How are you setting up for success? Like, what are, you know, I ask them what they're doing. So often, even though the child's 3 years old, they're still putting them up on the changing table. They're still doing it all for them. So of course, of course the parent's overwhelmed. They're lifting up this heavy 50, 60 pound baby. And to me, at 3, they're not babies. and you're not giving them or showing them of what to do or how to do it, or where to go, and having that explanation. So how can you expect them to know how to use the toilet and go if you're still changing them on the changing table?
Hmm.
uh, so really it goes back to um and sometimes I feel like that shouldn't be something I should ask, because I think it should be a given. But I've learned early on that you could expect everything and anything, and so many people just don't know.
Yeah.
So that's where getting help and support and learning, like where the child should be developmentally, what should be happening. And so that's one of my big missions, is educating on how to be doing toilet learning in more of a developmental way versus my child's now 2 or 3, and what should I be doing.
Hmm.
And I don't want to make it, I don't want it to be a forced process. I want it to be a learning process. So I don't know if I answered that question, to be
No, I
honest,
think
but
that's great. It's really helpful because I think like as you become a parent, there is no playbook. You're kind of figuring so much of it out for yourself, even though people have been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. We still get to figure it out anew each time. Can you
right.
share any like success stories that have really hit home with you of families that you have supported as they've gone through this process of toilet learning?
Yeah. One family that really stands out to me, that just kind of came to the top of my mind just now. I worked with a family in Dubai, and their older child was 4 years old, was on the spectrum, and then they also had a 18-month-old. So the parents came to me for the older child, and when I told them, well, let's do both children, they were in shock. They're like, okay, they didn't like, well, we weren't thinking about doing the younger one. I'm like, well, I think, and the younger child was atypical. So I was like, well, they're in the prime, in the sensitive period. The sensitive period is a period where something comes very easily, very naturally. The child's very eager and willing to learn.
Hmm.
So the sensitive period for toilet learning is between 15 and 24 months. So that's when it usually comes very easily, very naturally for a child. So it doesn't mean it's not going to happen after, after 2. Obviously, we're all not wearing diapers at a certain point. It happens. It just can take longer. Um, and again, so I was dealing with a child who's on the spectrum, who had some needs, who was very always hitting for whatever reason, the child always hit the mother. Um, so I had to go through all those struggles. And within 2 months, they worked with me for 2 months. And by then, the older one was successful, stopped hitting, was using the toilet. The younger one was also transitioning underwear, using the toilet. So it was really powerful to see like how them working together, and how supporting both children and role modeling, and kind of just bringing in all the tools, um, and the hitting and all the frustration, everything that they had, and plus in Dubai, different cultures, overseas. So it was really um, nice to see all that happening. But I do love it most when parents are coming to me while the child's in the sensory period, and just guiding them through the process and what to happen naturally, and having them transition that way.
That's so great. And so, lastly, one of the things I want to touch base on is you authored a book. It's
Yeah,
called I Can Do It Toilet Learning. What motivated you to write it, and how can it assist parents and children during this journey?
yeah. Um, so so I'm big. I don't know, just one day I was like, I need to write a book that helps supports the child and that helps supports the parent.
Hmm.
I'm like, so again, I brought in the idea of children need to see the visuals. They need to see it, and they need it to feel like it, like they're in the story. So I created a cute little story that had a child, um, and then I added my cat Leo to it because they always need some kind of character, right? um, and And then at the same time, it gives tips and suggestions for the adult and what they should be doing and or saying at each of the steps.
Mhm.
So I'm guiding the language, the what what to do, what to say. I talk about the feeling. I talk about what it looks like. I have routine charts in there and how to use a toilet and how to wipe and how to wash hands and I even created like a little song that's at the very end of the book, which you can find on YouTube as well. Then also at the very end of the book, I have a like how to start, a little Q&A. So it's really useful for both the child and the parent. So I decided after creating the first book, writing a series. So I Can Do It Toilet Learning is the first of the series, which is
Mhm.
already available. It is on Amazon. However, Amazon has the paperback version. I personally um, would rather promote the board book version, which I sell personally from my home. Because the board book is what's will last you forever. The
Mhm.
children are able to change the pages easily on their own. So the board book version is preferable, and it's nice and big and heavy. For kids really like that substance. And then my second book on I can do it hand washing will be coming out soon as well,
Oh, great.
along with my flashcards. So I've created flashcards using the same visuals that I've created with the books. The flashcards are great to use in a classroom setting, great to use in the home setting. Like I said, you could use them in creating you could create your own sequence, you could create your own visuals, you could create your own social story with them. Again, really young ages, there's visuals of this is a toilet, this is soap, this is toilet paper, just typical flashcards. No words are on them.
Mm.
um, so to me, that was really important, sticking true to what true flashcards are, and then they're universal. They can be used in any language.
Oh, that's so great. You said that the board books are available that you sell out of your home. What is the best way for folks to reach you?
Yeah, you could reach me through my website, which is bambinimethod.com. I'm also in the process of rebranding or redoing my website as well. So there you may be seeing some changes. So hopefully it works. But one of the things I'm rebranding in is that I'm finally getting true to my true passion um, with toilet learning and supporting and helping teachers.
Mhm.
So currently, since I started my business, I've been really focusing and working with parents one to one, and I'm still love doing that. But as I'm working with families one to one, I'm really seeing that there's a gap. So many families are coming to me like, well, we're doing this at home, but we're not getting support at school. Or at school, they're telling us they'll do whatever they want us, whatever we're doing at home, but we don't know what we're doing at home.
Mhm.
So there's some kind of gap, right? So I'm creating a training course for teachers and creating a certification for schools to have. So then there's a curriculum, there's consistency, there's routine. So many teachers they come from all different walks of life, and there is no training out there. And there's diaper training, DCFS has like this is how we change your diaper and these are steps that you need to follow. But there's no training on how do we transition from diapers to underwear.
Oh,
If
wow.
there's just this expectation of okay, by three, to be in the school, you have to be in underwear. So I really want to help and support and give teachers the training tools that they need um, in the school setting.
Oh, that's so great. So, should teachers or administrators reach out to your website as well if they're interested to learn more from you?
Yeah, definitely. There's an area on there where you could connect with me and you could book a call. Either my email information's on there, my phone is on there. But yeah, so all the information's on my website. Again, once my new website comes out, there's going to be an area there for parents. There's going to be a section in there for teachers and schools. And there's even going to be a section on my website for pediatric specialists. So other specialists who work with toddlers, OT, pediatricians, speech, um, things like that, who are always, parents are always asking for help and support. So I want to be able to work with all avenues and giving them the support they need to get the child into underwear.
Well, thank you so much, Carol, for offering to come on and talk about this. Again, as I said in the early part of our discussion, so often we don't get to talk enough about the young child's experience, and there's so much change going on at this time, and there's so little information available to people out there. So I just cannot thank you enough for offering your expertise and sharing information about what is a really big step for so many children and families.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right. And you can catch the Montessori microphone every week. Sometimes we're audio, sometimes we're video, but please come back and check us out. Until then, have a great week.